Remember, fantasy football never goes harder than in November. Welcome into the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I am your host, Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship. You know me from the Road to This High Stakes Lowdown and the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, as well as the FFPC, myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Connect with me on X at Eric Balkman, EricBalkman. You can see it right here. Is where you can connect with me. And I want to welcome in my guest co-host tonight. Welcome her back on the show. Hosting again, I think, but I don't know what it was, 7 months after the last time. You know her from Fantasy and Frames, at Fantasy and Frames on the X, at Stacy_Perez 83. On X, it is Stacy Perez. Stacy, welcome in. Thank you so much for hanging out tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, Balky. This is so fun. I always love coming on and chatting with you, and this is just like the best part of my night.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, I'm thrilled. Hopefully this will be a great way, or the best part of everybody's Thursday night here too. Tom Smith, our good buddy, already checking in. Eric, Stacy, and Thursday Night Football. Great way to kick off Thursday night. Well, it is fantasy football night in America, so I am with you there, Tom. How is the season going for you so far, Stacy, with your teams?
So far, so good. I feel like I just like everybody, just really been hit by the injury bug. Had a ton of Nico Collins and Chris Godwin, and was feeling really good about life until they got hurt. And then it's just kind of playing, grab somebody every week, really having to grind those waivers. But other than that, just things have been good. It's been such a fun season. Just looking forward to it every week. I'm almost kind of bummed that we're halfway through.
Yeah, it is. It's frustrating. Our mutual friend, Adam Krautwurst, I remember he post on an X, I think the early part of the 2023 season, where fantasy football is kind of turning into a game of attrition.
Yeah.
Because there's been so many injuries. And I think this year, especially with the receiver injuries are definitely up this year. And he said he didn't like that. And my initial reaction was to agree with him. But now I'm kind of like, you know what? I actually don't mind it. It really tests how deep your roster can go. It tests how good you are at start-sit decisions and exploiting the best matchups. I don't mind it. Like, it's a different type of game now than it was, 10, 15 years ago or whatever it is, because I think that when you have information that is easily accessible by everybody, before there was always the one or two players in your league that would always get the leg up on everybody because they knew. Well, yet now you don't really have that anymore, and it's really leveled the playing field, and it's made it more challenging. And quite frankly, Stacy, it's made it more fun.
I think so too. I mean, that's part of the fun of it, right? Is feeling, like that you've got the edge on everybody else in your league, and then when those guys that you grabbed off waivers hit, I mean, it's just like the best feeling. Like, how many people picked up Cedric Tillman and then started him, and are probably still doing victory laps, around their neighborhood. So
yeah, totally,
that's the best feeling, I think, in fantasy. It makes you feel good about all the research and work that you put into it.
We put in a lot of research and work into the show tonight, and Stacy and I are going to take you all the way up to the second quarter, roughly, of the Thursday Night Football game, which is a banger tonight. Baltimore and Cincinnati. It's going to be a fun one. We will get into conversations about Christian McCaffrey. We'll talk about the Cowboys, sans Dak Prescott going forward. We'll also talk about some of the trades that went down in the NFL. We will preview the Thursday Night Football game too. Mike Gesicki, Justice Hill, Deontay Johnson on the docket there. Stacy has built a Week 10 FFPC Weekly Challenge lineup. We will tear that apart, critique it, or build it up. Maybe it's going to be awesome. Knowing you, it's probably going to be awesome, Stacy. So there won't be much to critique there. And then we'll get into some start sits prior to the end of the show that I know a lot of FFPC players are facing as we head into Week 10. I want to remind everybody, speaking of the Weekly Challenge, you can play right now at myffpc.com, the Week 10 Weekly Challenge. If you thought your time in 2024 was up on building FFPC lineups, you need to think again, because you can go and play with or without kickers and defenses, 10-team lineup or 12-team lineup, enter for as little as $35, win up to $2,500 in 10, 30, or 100-team contests now at myffpc.com, or just scan the QR code that Matt Deutsch has put up on the screen right here. God, I always screw this up. Over here. No, over here. Sorry.
Down here.
Over there.
Yeah.
Right below Stacy. That's where the QR code is. Yes, thank you. And you can play there, no stacking. You can only play one player per NFL team. If you want Lamar Jackson, you can't have Zay Flowers. If you want Joe Burrow, you can't have Jamar Chase. myffpc.com, myffpc.com, or scan the QR code and make week 10 a lucrative one here. Want to welcome in Michael Kinzel, Dom Gazzetti, also watching in tonight on YouTube. Thanks, guys, and hopefully we'll help you out tonight. Stacy, let's lead things off in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence apparently unlikely to play against the Minnesota Vikings this week. Now, the injury that he has on his shoulder is not his throwing shoulder, but he is still receiving a lot of treatment in Jacksonville. They haven't made any decisions for this week, although it sounds like it's not going to happen in week 10. And quite frankly, the quote from Ian Rapoport was weigh options for the future, and knowing where Jacksonville is standings right now, this could be the Mac Jones show, not only for week 10, but forward here. Let's just talk about week 10 right now. And what are we doing with guys like Evan Engram, Brian Thomas, Travis Etienne, and Tank Bigsby? I think is another story, but we can touch on them for sure. But I want to lead it off with Thomas and Engram. I'm still playing Engram. I think most of my leagues I have Thomas in. I'm still throwing him out there with Mac Jones. But do I need to be rethinking that? How is this Jaguars offense going to go against a really talented Brian Flores defense with Minnesota?
Yeah, well, first, say hey to Dominic over there in the chat. It was very nice to meet you in Kentucky as well. I think it is Mac Jones time. I was really surprised to see the injury news about Trevor Lawrence right at first, and then even more surprised to see that they're weighing the options in the future, which I don't blame them. They've been absolutely horrific this year. And I wouldn't want to play against Minnesota this week either. So we'll give that to Mac Jones. But I think you just have to kind of downgrade guys like Thomas, Engram. I think you're right. You still are playing them, but you got to downgrade them just a little bit because who knows what Mac Jones is going to look like. Didn't they also sign CJ Beathard?
Yes, off the Dolphins practice squad. They have CJ Beathard now as well. Yes.
Yeah, so he's back there too. I mean, Trevor wasn't having that terrible of a fantasy season, despite the Jaguars just not having a great season altogether. But, he was averaging like 16.1 fantasy points per game. So that's going to go down, and the production there at quarterback's going to go down for them. So I don't feel super comfortable with it, but given all the injuries and everything this week and bye weeks coming up, I think you have to go with those guys. Also keep in mind too, especially for this week, Minnesota is allowing only the 8th fewest touchdowns all year, so it averages out to like 2.1 touchdowns for opposing teams per game. So not exactly exciting things to see from the Jacksonville offense, like most likely coming up this week.
Yeah, and I want to, Matt, if we could throw up, he's already got it up. That's why Matt Deutsch is the best producer in the business. Tom Smith has Trevor Lawrence in the league. His only other quarterback is Jordan Love. So he looked on the wire to see who's out there. He's got Derek Carr, who's facing the Falcons this week, but probably no Chris Olave, and maybe no, who was the other receiver that didn't practice? Cedric Wilson did not practice today so he's a hurting unit. Or you could get Cooper Rush. If you were Tom Smith, what would you do here, Stacy? Because I can't count on Lawrence. It's going to have to be Carr or Rush for him this week. And quite frankly, I don't really have a good answer for him here. I lean towards Carr, but I don't know.
I think I'm leaning towards Carr too. I mean, Cooper Rush has started before, I think 2022 when Dak had that injury. You're not exactly excited about that unless you're in a super flex format, and then you can, throw somebody in. I think Derek Carr, at least has a better matchup with Atlanta this week. Those two teams hate each other. So they're going to, I feel like that is going to be a huge, I think was it week 17 or 18 that they played each other last year? That it was just that massive shootout. And
that's right.
Jameis let Jamal Williams get the last score in just to kind of stick it to the Falcons. So I kind of expect that to be a pretty high scoring game. So even if there's not too many people back there, they're going to find somebody for Derek Carr to throw it to. It's not great either way, Tom. It's not good.
This is like picking your favorite. The game, the jelly bean game that at least my kids play it, where you get this these jelly bellies or whatever, and you have to pick one out and you have to taste it, and it could be old shoe or it could be toasted marshmallow. You're picking from all the bad jelly beans this week, Tom. It's a bad situation. The total in that game, to your point, Stacy. The Saints are 3.5-point dogs, so it should be a positive game script, you would think, for Derek Carr. Total in that game is 46. If we look at that Cowboys game against the Eagles, it's 43.5. But again, positive game script for Cooper Rush, you would think there as well. Cooper Rush is a guy that, and take this with a grain of salt, but if I remember correctly, I don't really remember that guy being able to pump the ball down the field all that well. So I would think it's probably going to be a great game for Jake Ferguson, but for like Lamb and Tolbert, and like, I don't know. And so
Right.
and Carr can throw it down the field. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say Lamb's banged up too. He's got that shoulder injury. I mean, they think he's gonna play, but I mean, I'm kind of surprised if he's gonna play if they're gonna be with their season so bad and then possibly shutting down Dak for a while.
Mike McCarthy is begging CeeDee Lamb to tough it out, not to save his job this week for sure.
He needs to sweeten that pot a little bit, I think.
I'm gonna ask you this. It's not on the show sheet, but one tight end that you may, if you drafted Evan Engram, getting back to this Trevor Lawrence discussion, if you drafted Evan Engram, you probably don't have a better option than him, unless you got Cade Otton, who I would play over Evan Engram this week. This Cade Otton thing has been unbelievable. Mike Evans and Sterling Shepard did not participate in the walkthrough for the Buccaneers today. Otton looks awesome. He looked awesome on Monday night. It's been tremendous. You had him against me in a KFFSC league that was very, very close. And then at the end of the night, it was not close at all. I was so frustrated because in another league in Kentucky, I had Otton and I needed to get him. I needed one more catch. I ended up losing by 0.9. To him. Oh, and I'll share this story real quick because everybody will appreciate this. Stacy, our friend Brad Cruz, Fantasy Assassins. I was playing him in one of the auction leagues this week. I was down by, I didn't think about this. I was down by 0.9 and I had nobody on Monday Night Football. And Brad had Xavier Worthy. And Xavier Worthy got a negative 10-yard rush that put me up by 0.1, and he never got anything the rest of the night. If Brad just would have benched him, he would have gotten the win. Instead, and I haven't talked to him about it because I'm sure he's kind of sour, but that was one of the most unbelievable things. Getting back to Cade Otton here. This is not stopping. This is a real thing. We talked, I can't remember who I was talking to about this. I think it was on the lowdown on Tuesday when I was talking to Barney Newkirk and John Laskowski. There's always this tight end that comes out from the top, from below the top 12. Otton is probably this year's guy, right?
I think he is. I can't, when you said Cade Otton, I could not have been more pleased because I have been a huge Cade Otton fan this entire season. I have got him stashed everywhere. I think I've got 21% exposure to him in all my best ball teams. Love Cade Otton. He's on the field an absurd amount, even when Godwin was still there and Evans hadn't gotten hurt yet. He was just a guy that Baker trusted to be out there and produce for him. And obviously with Godwin and Evans not there anymore, Jalen McMillan's seen some injuries. Cade Otton is the guy that he trusts to go to. Over the last 3 games, he's gotten 10 targets, and 11 targets. Not surprisingly, those are his 3 best fantasy weeks with 18, 29, and 21 points. I just have been so pleased with getting Cade Otton everywhere that I got him and then going out and trying to grab him in spots where I wasn't able to quite yet or didn't have, roster space. But I think he's a must start from now on into the rest of the season, is over. And if you were able to get him off waivers, you are loving life right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about that too, with the FFPC, with the tight end premium format. I mean, he is such, I don't want to say a league winner, but he's definitely on pace for that right now for sure. I want to bring this up. Just a draft or a team management philosophy question from Michael Quinzel on YouTube. Should I play the higher floor guy if I'm projected to win and a higher ceiling guy if I'm projected to lose my first year and I'm 5-4 in a Fantasy Pros Championship League? So to that end, and I don't know how you do this, Stacy, when you're playing in these national tournaments. Yes, I'm focused in on that week's matchup, but I still like shooting for the moon and playing that higher ceiling guy, regardless of if I'm projected to win or not. Projections are one person or a collection of people's thoughts, right? It's not gospel. And I want to pile up points as much as I can. So regardless if I'm the favorite or not, I almost always want to play the higher ceiling guy when I'm competing for, a 5-figure or 6-figure or 7-figure grand prize.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm kind of in that boat right now where I was looking at tonight, like, do I throw Khalil Herbert in my lineup in a couple places versus some other guys that I've got? And one of my ones that I was kind of worried about was Javonte Williams, who's playing the Jets this week. Right? No, they're playing Kansas City. I'm sorry. They're playing Kansas City this week. Either way, it's still difficult, rushing defense. But, I ultimately decided to throw Khalil Herbert in there just because I think it's going to be a really high scoring game. There's going to be a lot of action in this game. In that particular league, I was like, you know what? We're just going to shoot for the moon. Javonte Williams was my least impactful player on that squad. He just mattered the least out of everybody that I had. So I was like, you know what? We're going to go ahead and take a flyer on Clover, see how that works out. And so that's kind of my philosophy when you're looking at, who you're starting, who you're sitting for, the week.
And it always gets dicey too. I mean, these next 2 weeks are going to be brutal. I've been trying to look ahead as much as I can and try to make sure that I'm patching up future holes in my roster with 6 teams on bye next week. And then what is it? No teams on bye in I forget how this is. I think we get 6 teams on bye next week, 6 teams on bye in week 12, and then nobody on bye in week 13, and then 4 more teams on bye in week 14.
All the good teams are on bye on week 14.
Yeah, the NFL schedule makers, they're mad scientists.
I think they hate fantasy, really. I think whoever does the NFL schedule, I think they lost in their fantasy league several years ago, and they've just been bitter, and they're taking it out on everyone else who plays fantasy every single year. They're like, who are the good players? Let's put them on week bye in week 14 every year.
You know what? The other thing too to think about it is like they probably, the schedule makers, I would say probably assume like, well, fantasy matchups, I mean, those aren't decided till the championships. They're not decided till like week 16, but they're not aware of like the FFPC or the KFFSC, where that we still got league championships going on in weeks.
We got money to win in those
exactly. It's huge. Keep it up with the questions on YouTube. Let's go to back to Michael here. Is Deontay Johnson going to ever have a double-digit projection again in Baltimore? In a 10-team league, would you drop him? So I think he is droppable in a 10-teamer. In my 12-teamers, I'm still hanging on to him. And I still feel like that Baltimore offense is so good, Stacy. There's going to be weeks where I need to find somebody to plug in as my flex. And even though Johnson has to deal with Mark Andrews and Derrick Henry and Zay Flowers, I still feel like he's relevant, and I still would feel okay about flexing him out. Now, the days of him being a top 20 guy, which is what he was in Carolina, that's gone for the rest of the season. But he's in a much better offense. The spike weeks might pick up a little bit here. Don't drop him in a 12-teamer. 10-teamer, I get it if you have to.
Yeah, a 10-team for sure. You're going to have better options in a 10-team. But yeah, a 12-team, I wouldn't do it yet, especially with injuries and bye weeks coming up. It's just, who knows what could happen with Baltimore. I mean, it could be a Nelson Aguilar game. Like every week, somebody else, right?
Rashad Bateman.
Flower.
Justice Hill.
Yeah, Justice Hill. So, and there's always a chance that Deontay Johnson, I mean, he is very talented. So there's always a chance that he comes in and has those better weeks. But he's been so boomer bust this year. I mean, he's either going to go, just a ton of points, kind of like a Gabe Davis. That's how I always think of when I hear boomer bust. That's always my first, like, there's a picture of him in the dictionary under boomer bust. It's Gabe Dave. But Deontay Johnson, I feel like it's had that kind of year too. So.
Tom Smith has a question. Do you think, and we'll get into more Mike Gesicki talk in the second segment here, but I'll bring it up right now. Do you both think Mike Gesicki is a safer play tonight than TJ Hawkinson this week? Unequivocally, I do. No T. Higgins tonight. Gesicki's basically been the de facto second wide receiver on this team. And the total
T. Higgins handcuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, weird to think about, but yes, he is. That total on that game is 53 tonight. Burrow and the Bengals are 6-point underdogs, so I think Gesicki's in for a big game. I still don't know how far Hawkinson is along to be getting quote unquote regular snaps in Minnesota. So I think there's a lot more to like with Gesicki tonight than Hawkinson. And Michael said, well, why don't you just play both of them? Well, he's already got George Kittle. He can only flex out 2 tight ends in this league. So, but yeah, I love Gesicki over Hawkinson this week.
I do too. Absolutely. Huge Gesicki fan this week. He's been just absolute clutch when Higgins is missed. I think he scores like it's 15 points per game when Higgins is out. So, I mean, you've got to, if you have him, you have to start him tonight.
If for no other reason, to enjoy the end zone gritty if he catches a touchdown tonight, which is always a highlight for me.
Enjoy or cringe, either one. Yeah. They scored 79 total points in that game in week 5. So I think they're just going to absolutely blow that over.
We could see like 20-something to 20-something by the time we sign off tonight. You never know.
Oh, easily.
Ian Rapoport had this report earlier this morning, and this one really caught me off guard, Stacy. The Carolina Panthers have extended the contract of running back Chuba Hubbard to the tune of 4 years and $33 million. 773 yards from scrimmage, 6 touchdowns in 9 games this year, 17.7 touches per game this year. That's a career high. And it all makes perfect sense. $15 million in guaranteed money. he can earn up to $37 million in incentives. Hey, I get it, why you'd want to pay your running back. What I don't get is that this running back that just got paid by the Panthers is teammates with a guy that Carolina just used a second-round pick on in Jonathan Brooks. They have not yet seen him this season. Is this a commentary on what they think Jonathan Brooks is? Is this a commentary on how good they think Brooks is? Is this a commentary on whether they may have made a mistake in drafting Brooks? I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too far into this, but quite frankly, Stacy, I'm kind of at a loss now in Dynasty, not sure what to do with Hubbard, not sure what to do with Brooks, as one got paid and the other one got invested a lot of draft capital into. What do you make of this Carolina running back situation going forward? Because it changed on its head today.
It did. Well, just think a couple years ago, how much did they pay Miles Sanders to come, from Philly? So I think it really has more to say about who's running the show in Carolina, really, than the talent in these guys. I love it when guys get their money, and Chuba Hubbard definitely deserves it. Love to see that. I think Jonathan Brooks is still going to be a great running back in the league. Probably could have gotten a ton for him if they traded him at this point, if that's what they were going to do, just pay Chuba Hubbard. But, I don't know that a lot of what they do makes a ton of sense. And I don't know that I'm taking anything away from that about who's going to be the guy, who's going to be, relegated to a secondary role, just based on what they pay them. I think with that specific team, I think it's hard to kind of read the tea leaves there based on how they pay people.
Right. Okay. And going forward, I mean, listen, it's good to have talent, on your team. And chances are Hubbard and Brooks are not always both going to be healthy at the same time, which makes the other one a very viable play, whether you have them in season long or the FFPC Weekly Challenge. It makes sense. Permar, we will get to the I just saw this Jermaine Burton report from Jeremy Fowler. I guarantee we will get to that in the second segment. Michael Kinzel also has a flex question. He has Joe Mixon and Saquon Barkley already starting. Should we be telling him to start DeAndre Swift this week against the Patriots, or Tyrone Tracy this week at Carolina in Germany? By the way, get your lineups in Saturday night. We got a 9:30 a.m. kickoff from Germany on Sunday. I happen to like Swift a little bit better than Tracy this week. That's what I would encourage him to do. Stacy, do you like Swift or Tracy better in week 10?
I think I have to go with Swift in this one. I don't necessarily trust the overseas games. I always think that what we think is going to happen, what's the most obvious answer, and then something crazy goes wrong.
Right.
For there, it's never who you think it's going to be. So I love Tyrone Tracy this year. Absolutely love him. But I think if we're talking those two specific players this week, I think I got to go Swift.
You are going Swift, as am I. I think that is the strong choice, or the best play there. So go with God on that one, and hope for the best, Michael. I want to talk about Christian McCaffrey, who is in the news this week because he's probably going to be making his debut. In fact, Kyle Shanahan said about a half hour ago on KNBR in the Bay Area, Kyle Shanahan expects Christian McCaffrey to play against the Buccaneers. This is not a, hey, we'll see, hey, he's feeling good. No, he expects him to go. McCaffrey has been practicing without pain, according to Shanahan, and could be ready for maybe something more than just a few cursory snaps here or there. 15 touches, maybe 20 touches, maybe. Even if he's around that 15 area, I'm playing McCaffrey. Running back is hard to come by, especially one with the upside of McCaffrey this week. I think if you have him on your team, I know he's missed the whole season. It feels weird to start him when you have no frame of reference for 2024 for him, but he's so talented and the offense is so good, Stacy. I am playing McCaffrey everywhere.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's Christian McCaffrey. He's your 101. You probably took him at 101. He's been practicing all week. I saw some videos of him practicing today. He said he could have gone last week, but they were just being extra cautious. I really didn't think he was going to play at all this season. So the fact that he's back now, if I've held on to him this long and I'm still, in the playoff run, I'm absolutely starting him. Mm-hmm. You've got to feel pretty good about it. I mean, the Bucs are allowing 130 yards rushing per game. And it's Christian McCaffrey. I mean, they're going to be relying on him. Jordan Mason's a little banged up. He's, kind of coming back there, but there's no way that you're benching Christian McCaffrey this week.
I'm glad you brought up Mason, because that's the next step in the Niners backfield, potentially. I think it was Bill Hollywood on here last week and I was talking to Kev Wheeler about players I would drop for, some of these other running backs. And I mentioned Isaac Guerendo as a guy I would drop. And Bill Hollywood posted in the chat, he's like, I wouldn't drop Guerendo yet. And I did drop him in a couple leagues. I kept him in some others. And I actually got him back in one league. How do you handle this backup situation with the Niners? Jordan Mason, full practice yesterday, and then he's downgraded to a limited practice today. If you only have the possibility of one of these guys taking up a spot on your roster, would you rather it be Jordan Mason? Would you rather it be Isaac Guerendo? The talent we don't question with Mason. It's the health that we're questioning right now.
For sure. And I think at this point, I think you just have to tell Jordan Mason, thank you for your service, but we're going to put you on the waivers right now, because Isaac Guerendo just looked absolutely explosive in week, 8, because they were on a bye last week. So week 8 looked fantastic. Since week 4, Jordan Mason has not gotten above 10 fantasy points per game in a PPR format. So something to be a little concerned about too is that he did come on the scene, absolutely, blew up fantasy for a couple weeks. But then the last few weeks that we've had to use him, he's really been no more than, like a flex, and kind of like a not super exciting flex at that. So, if I've got this situation that I'm looking at, you've got CMC coming back, he's going to be the guy. It's not like they do a committee there in San Francisco. So you're looking at who can I stash as a potential backup just in case something goes wrong with McCaffrey. And honestly, I think I would feel a little bit better. You've got a little bit more potential with Isaac Guerendo. So if I have to make that choice, I think I'm going to keep hanging on to Isaac Guerendo.
Yeah, and I think the thing is you're hanging on to both, right? Like if you have the possibility to hang on to both, hold on to both. That may not be realistic, especially when we get into these buys. You may have to drop one of them. And I think I'm with you with the fact that Mason comes back for a full practice after the bye, and now he's already downgraded to limited. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but Guerendo is the type of guy who looked very, very. I mean, Mason looked very, very good too, but Guerendo seems to be the healthier option right now, and that's why I would lean towards him. Let's go to Ray C on YouTube. Would you rather play Kyler Murray or Sam Darnold this week? Scared of the game script for Darnold, and it might be raining. That is a possibility for sure. Sam Darnold this week is going up against the Jaguars, we mentioned earlier, who will probably be having Mac Jones as their starting quarterback. Sam Darnold at Jacksonville, or Kyler Murray, who's at home against the Jets. Normally, I like to start the guy who is going to be using his legs. Murray wasn't all that great last week. And Darnold, the fact that he has Hawkinson out there now, and Addison looked great last week. You get the best wide receiver in the league with Justin Jefferson in a strong ground game. I just feel like that offense is more poised to explode this week. So I would be playing Darnold over Kyler Murray, even though he does not have as well-rounded of a fantasy game as Murray. I like the matchup for Darnold here better than playing Murray against the Jets.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, if you take a look at the numbers, Jacksonville's giving up the second most fantasy points per game to opposing teams' quarterbacks. And then, you've got that Sam Darnold, like you said, has got everybody back, playing for him. The Jets, if you take a look at their numbers, they actually give up the 4th fewest fantasy numbers to opposing teams' quarterbacks. So something to think about. They're going to be getting after Kyler all day. If it's me, I'm going to start Sam Darnold. I think he's got a better chance for fantasy success this week.
It could be one of those games where they just, and I know there could be rain, but it could be one of those games where the Vikings just, he throws a touchdown to Jefferson, one to Addison, maybe another one to Jefferson, maybe another one to Hawkinson, and they get up 21-0, 24-0 early, and Darnold's already got his fantasy day banked, and whatever you get after that is gravy. Sean Green, our good buddy in the YouTube chat, Darnold or Purdy. Here, I would play Purdy over Darnold this week, Stacy.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're starting Purdy on that one. He's going to have his guys back now. It looks like Jennings is set to play too. He's doing a lot better with his health.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think out of those two, I'm definitely going to go Purdy.
That total on that 49ers Buccaneers game is 50.5, which and the Vikings Jaguars game is just 44. Okay. Let's go to Michael Pittman. Let's talk about Michael Pittman here. Stacy's interesting stuff going on in Indianapolis. He was not spotted at today's practice dealing with back injury and a finger injury. He dislocated his finger against the Vikings last week. And the last few weeks, he's been playing through a back injury. Now, what makes this more interesting, not just because of the injuries, Josh Downs has actually been really, really good and taken over as sort of the de facto number one receiver for the Colts, demoting Pittman a little bit. Now, if Pittman was totally right and 100% healthy, maybe that wouldn't be the case. But that is the case right now. And Pittman is a guy that in a few leagues, Stacy, I have benched him over the course of the last couple of weeks, and I will be benching him in a few leagues this week. I'm hit hard. There's one league I have to start him in, so hopefully he plays because I'm dealing with injuries and bye weeks at the receiver position. But Pittman is a guy that if I can avoid it, I want him I don't want him in my lineup this week.
No, you really don't. I mean, he's only had 3 games this season where he's had double-digit fantasy points. That was in weeks 4, 5, and 6. His last 2 games, he didn't even get 3 points. So obviously, we know he is dealing with those injury issues. But at the end of the day, if he's injured, you don't want to be starting him, especially with his production levels have tailed off so significantly. And then Downs is taking over. Downs is the one who looks like the most explosive wide receiver in that offense.
Yeah.
And Buffalo's got a pretty tough secondary as well, so I'm really not even optimistic if he was healthy and playing that I'd really want to start him either. And with him not being and missing practice, I think it's one of those where if he's on your lineup, you definitely got to bench him this week.
And Matt Deutsch posted on YouTube too. He's playing Darnell Mooney where Michael Pittman. Totally support that decision. I think that's the right call. Especially when you consider how relevant Mooney's been in that offense and how good that offense has been the last month or so. Yeah, I think Mooney is a guy you got to get in over him, over Pittman, excuse me. Dak Prescott, we got to talk Cowboys here. Jane Slater from the NFL Network has reported that Dak Prescott's diagnosis on his injury is a partial avulsion of his hamstring tendon that is partially torn off the bone. That sounds absolutely, I don't know if it sounds worse for it's awful and like painful. It sounds like too, like this is not a situation you want to be in if you're Dak Prescott, if you're any member of the Cowboys organization, or if you have any of these guys on your roster. Now, we know Cooper Rush is going to be playing for the foreseeable future. I think Ferguson is definitely still playable in the FFPC. You might have a better option in a non-tight end premium format. But he's definitely playable in the FFPC. CeeDee Lamb, you mentioned this earlier. Like, we don't even know if he's going to go this week. This is just disaster written all over it for your Cowboys fantasy options right now.
Oh, it totally does. I mean, I know that they're trying to do everything they can to avoid putting him in IR and like getting second opinions and all that, but like, man, if the hamstring tendon's partially torn off the bone, I don't know what else you're gonna do with that other than he's gonna miss significant time.
Mm-hmm.
And Cooper Rush is not exciting. It's not like you're gonna get the same level of quarterback play with Cooper Rush that you will with Dak Prescott. So, I like Ferguson. He's been one of my guys all season. Dak loves throwing to his tight end, but we don't have Dak right now. Right, so we don't know what's going on with CeeDee Lamb. The rest of the offense has not been great at all. The Cowboys are 3-5. I just feel like this is a lost season for the Cowboys. Like we gotta pack it up and let's look towards next season.
Which you're worried about if you're a CeeDee Lamb owner, right? Or even Rico Dowdle or Jake Ferguson, because you got to understand that stuff that they would normally gut out, they may not be gutting out at the end of the season, and it's very very frustrating. I'm sure for them as well. Garrett Woodworth on YouTube has a question that I myself had to figure out right before the start of the show tonight when I was setting my lineups. Chase Brown tonight against the Ravens, or J.K. Dobbins, who I believe is at home. Yes, at home against the Titans. Titans quietly have had a pretty good defense this year. I like the matchup slightly better for Chase Brown, but given the fact that you're looking at a situation where the points could just be piled up in bunches. And how much Chase Brown is used as a receiver out of the backfield, that's what tipped the scales for me. I chose Chase Brown over J.K. Dobbins this week, Stacy.
I think it's tough here. I mean, I think you can really go either one. And I like Brown. He has been the guy there. Zach Moss is now obviously out for the year. You've got Khalil Herbert coming in this week on a short week. I think Herbert is a huge upgrade over Zach Moss. But you've got to remember too, they're facing Baltimore. Baltimore has a very, very stingy run defense. I think they're only allowing like 75 rushing yards per game. Then of course, you've got Dobbins facing Tennessee, who is also a very good, defense as well. they're not the best run defense, which is what
Right.
the Ravens are. So I think you could really go either way on this one. Dobbins has looked great. Like, what a great story too that he's come
Hmm.
back this season and just looked amazing after all those injuries. So I think you could probably go either way on this one. But I might lean toward Chase just a little bit more, just because I think it is just going to be such a high scoring game. But I don't think you go wrong either way.
The other thing too with Dobbins in the leagues I have him in, I feel like whenever he's healthy, I want to play him
Yeah,
because he has missed so much time that like you want to play him when he's out there because he's going to miss games. It's what he
right.
does. And knock on wood, which I have some right here. He probably should be good to go.
Yeah.
As long as he's healthy, you can play him. So I'm with you. I could go either way. I went with Brown. We lean towards Brown here. Let's talk. I want to go back to the Cowboys. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the trade they made with the Panthers this week. They get Dallas gets Jonathan Mingo and a 7th rounder next year in exchange for a 4th rounder next year. This was not a good career for Jonathan Mingo in Carolina. 55 catches, 539 yards, no touchdowns in 24 games. Carolina, we'll get to them in a second. But Dallas, is Mingo worth picking up given that, we don't know what's going on with Cooks, given that this might be a sign that they're not thrilled with Jalen Tolbert as the number 2 receiver there. Did you go out and pick up Mingo in any of your leagues, Stacy?
I did not. I really liked Mingo coming out of Ole Miss. He was very much in that kind of like AJ Brown, DK Metcalf kind of mold. Like they. I have a friend last year that said like Ole Miss has a type in their wide receivers, and they're all like built the same way.
Right.
But like he really hasn't done anything of note the last 2 seasons. You've got Xavier Legette coming in and playing extremely well, so you can't even blame it on just like a bad offense in Carolina, right? So I just don't know if this changes anything in Dallas. You've got the change coming in with Cooper Rush. Like, I really don't know that this makes a huge difference at all. And I don't think we were really looking to pick up anybody on the Dallas offense. And I don't know that Mingo coming in changes that at all. I don't think he's somebody that I'm looking to go get right now. You've got much better options out there, I think.
And I mean, he's probably not even relevant at least until Prescott gets back, which may
Right.
not even happen this season, depending
Exactly.
upon how Cooper Rush does and whether they're able to stack up a few wins to get back in the playoff race.
Yeah.
Carolina, do you have a favorite receiver there? Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker, now Xavier Legette as well. Is there anybody that we should be paying attention to there now that Mingo is gone?
I think it's Legette for me. I mean, Adam Thielen is, older. He's on his way out, the door. Jalen Coker's great, but I don't know that you can really trust the Carolina offense just yet to be anything consistent. Xavier Legette is the closest thing to consistent I think they've had
Mm-hmm.
so far. He's, just absolutely just been really great, coming out of college this year, his rookie season. And I mean, he's a guy you can throw in. I threw him in a little bit in the beginning of the season and totally got burnt. There's a couple games where he put up a 0 and but I think he's really kind of come on. He's gotten a little bit more comfortable in that offense. I feel like Bryce Young is getting a little bit more comfortable in that
Mm-hmm.
offense. I think this week though, it's my how the overseas games give me a little heebie-jeebies. So I don't know that I'd really trust him this week, but you might not have another option. So if you have to start anybody in Carolina, for me, it's at least in their passing offense, it's going to be Legette.
We talked about the Niners earlier, Stacy. I want to briefly go back there because I got into a conversation with one of my my local fantasy football show, the co-host that I do it with there. He likes Ricky Pearsall going forward, and I said, "Yeah, I can see that, especially for dynasty purposes." But let's not forget about how big Jawan Jennings was when Ayuk was missing and when Samuel was missing or whoever it was. Maybe when both of them were missing, putting up like a 40 or 50 point week or whatever it was. He was limited in practice yesterday. He's limited in practice today. Tampa Bay is who he gets this year or this week, excuse me. And that can be had. That defense definitely can be had. I kind of like Jennings as a sneaky flex in the FFPC coming back, even though Deebo Samuel should be out there as well. And even though the Christian McCaffrey is making his return here, I prefer Jennings over Pearsall for redraft. Dynasty, yeah, it's probably Pearsall, but I mean, he's got to take it away from Jennings. And right now, Jennings is the guy.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I mean, Pearsall's coming back from that gunshot injury. He looked good in the game that he did play, his first debut game. I'm really pleased with how that's going. I think he is going to be great. Dynasty is where you want to have him. that's where you're going to feel, like comfortable with him. I don't think you're starting him over Jawan Jennings. You just can't. I mean, Jawan Jennings has been a huge factor in this offense going back to last season. Look at the Super Bowl. I mean, he caught a touchdown and he threw for a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So he's a guy that they trust absolutely in this offense, even with Debo there. Now that Ayuk's gone, you've got this Bucs defense coming in. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing teams' wide receivers. I think he's a guy you can absolutely feel comfortable throwing in your lineup this week. I've got Jennings in a couple places that I've stashed here and there. The one week that he did go off, I dropped him in a league. So you got to feel really good about that, watching him go off for 50 points on someone else's roster. But he's a guy that's always going to come in and be sneaky and get those points for you, sneak away with those touchdowns. And especially now more than ever, I don't even think it's sneaky at this point. I think that they're going to use him.
Right. It totally true. Very true. Let's stick in the Bay Area here. The Raiders have hired Scott Turner as their interim offensive coordinator. Now, if Scott Turner sounds familiar, probably one of two reasons. Number one, he's the son of Norv Turner, who was the former head coach of the Raiders, OC of the Cowboys when they had Aikman and Smith and Michael Irvin and won those Super Bowls in the 90s. Scott Turner was also the OC for the Commanders for 3 years when he guided offenses that were quarterbacked by, and shout out to Roto World for this, Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, Garrett Gilbert, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Sam Howell, and then Carson Wentz. Under Wentz, they were a pretty conservative team. They didn't throw the ball a whole lot. They counted on the ground game. Desmond Ridder may or may not be the quarterback. I don't believe Antonio Pierce has made a decision on that, and he doesn't have to until week 11 because the Raiders are on bye this week. My hope is that Brock Bowers, and Jacoby Myers are still relevant enough to start Bowers every week and then start Myers as a flex in the right matchups. I don't really count on anybody else in that offense. But what's the likelihood, Stacy, that those two guys still stay relevant with this change from Luke Getsy to Scott Turner as the OC in Las Vegas?
So I watched his press conference today, and he just seemed like really, excited to be there. He lives in the area. Like he said, he coached or he played at UNLV, and then they get his dad as a BOGO throw in. That's what I'm kind of calling it. But he said he just really likes to be a part of creative plays. And I took a look at the stats over here on Next Gen Stats, and I didn't know this. I'm a little surprised about it. Vegas is the 3rd highest passing team right now. They have total 349 pass plays so far on the season, which is only behind Cleveland and Seattle, which is kind of shocking. I didn't think that it was that high.
No, I didn't think it was that high either. That's surprising.
So hopefully they continue at least having that kind of volume and at least throwing that much. And if they do, I think we're absolutely going to we're still using Brock Bowers. Come on. It's it's a tight end position, and we are where we are with tight end. It's rough, right? But Myers is there as a potential to throw in too, but those are really going to be the only guys that you're looking at in that offense. But hopefully if they keep things going the way they have, just with a little bit better play calling.
It sounds like you're optimistic on both those guys, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it should be fine. I mean, honestly, Bobby, could it get any worse?
Well, the thing is, it could get worse for Bowers because he's been so unbelievable, and I don't think they would screw it up, but it's the Raiders, and you never know.
That's true. Don't put anything past them.
Right, exactly. I want to bring this up. Another trade: Mike Williams ends up going from the Jets to the Steelers in exchange for a 5th-round pick next year. Mike Williams is now going to an offense where he should be the number 2 wide receiver there. I don't know what that gets you because Jalen Warren and Najee Harris are active in the pass game out of the backfield. Pat Freiermuth still at tight end. And, of course, George Pickens is making a lot of plays there. Mike Williams is a guy that I might have put a few bids on, like keep him honest bids. I may or may not have gotten him. I don't know. I know I'm not playing him this week. What are your thoughts as to what we should be doing with Mike Williams? Does he deserve a roster spot in the FFPC, KFFSC for the remainder of the season right now?
I think it's going to depend on how many people you have injured. So if you're dealing with a lot of injuries, I think you could throw a couple dollars on him, see if you can get him some places. But altogether, he's not the most exciting player that's out there. He didn't exactly light it up with the Jets. And I know you could say, oh, he and, Aaron Rodgers didn't really get along. It seemed like there were some, issues there. But I mean, come on. If he was out there showing that he could, come down with the ball and get it, Rodgers would have been throwing it to him.
Right.
So I'm not really buying that whole, line of thinking. The Steelers pass at the 2nd lowest rate in the league at 47.3. Okay, so just because you're the second wide receiver in that offense does not mean anything to me. You've got Pickens there to deal with, and then a whole lot of other people that Arthur Smith is going to get it to, probably named Darnell Washington and Mecole Pruitt for all you know.
Yeah.
So that it's not really doing anything for me with him going to that team in particular. If he went somewhere else, there's a little more opportunity maybe. But yeah, the Steelers, I think it's going to be a swipe left for me on that one.
His best football is behind him, and to your point, he goes to an offense that has maybe whatever it is, the second smallest passing pie, for lack of a better term, in the NFL. And even if he gets a significant piece of that pie, it's still a very small dessert. You're not going to get much enjoyment off that if you have Mike Williams. We have a Thursday night football game that we are about 35 minutes away from. We'll step out and take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Khalil Herbert impact on Chase Brown. We're going to talk about this Jermaine Burton news that Permar brought up tonight, and we'll talk a little bit about the Ravens and how Mark Andrews might be in for a huge night. She's Stacy Perez from Fantasy and Frames. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. We roll on right after this.
We're telling ourselves happy stories about players we want to pick, less happy stories about players we don't want to pick. And part of that is being ready to abandon our own carefully crafted narratives when it's time to abandon them, right? Like, bail, this was not working, So like we come in with super hard opinions, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. The better fantasy players are the people who acknowledge quickly that, hey, this isn't working out. Doesn't mean you have to abandon a player, but it means you have to abandon the approach, and maybe you have to go with a different player. I mean, if people were playing Stephon Diggs last year down the stretch, they were only playing him because his name is Stephon Diggs. You have to be ready to acknowledge, hey, this guy's not getting the job done. I did it. Bloom and I had a big discussion about this last December, and I'm saying you can't play him right now, right? And I know that's a hard decision to make, because why? FOMO. We're going to miss out on that big game. The minute I sit this guy down, he's going to have the big game. Well, maybe. But also, while he is not having great games, there are other guys on your roster having great games. And I think that's to me, the hardest thing about fantasy is like, when do I divorce myself from my narrative? When do I tell when do I acknowledge my happy story is not coming true? I need to figure something else out. And the people who are good at that are the people who are good at fantasy football.
High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolling on here on the Better Sports Network. 8 minutes until the top of the hour. She is Stacy Perez from Fantasy and Frames. Stacy, tell us what you're doing with Fantasy and Frames. I know you've done a lot of shows with them over the last year or two. What else are you doing with them right now?
So I'm doing waiver shows right now on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock. We do the waiver show there. And actually, this year I forgot to tell you this, I started doing a Sunday tailgate with Player Profiler. I did know that. Yes. Yeah. So that's been exciting too. So I've been doing those two shows, a Sunday show and a Tuesday show. And that's where I've been spending the majority of my time, especially with waivers just being such a grind this year. Been spending a lot of time doing that. But yeah, so that is where you can find me on Sundays and on Tuesdays.
So the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel, right? And then Player Profiler on YouTube as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it. Perfect. What's that like working on Sunday? Like, I'm always freaked out. I used to do a show. We used to do a second High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour show on Sunday mornings prior to the games. And I was always freaking out about my own lineups that I couldn't really give it. Like, that's got to be kind of like a mind. I don't know what the right terminology is, but my mind would be swimming with everything going on. How do you handle something like that? That's crazy to me.
Oh man. Well, thankfully, the tailgate show doesn't go on until 7:30 at night.
Okay. All right. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you are recapping rather than setting everybody up.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So we're doing the little Sunday night football, preview, kind of going over all the day's action and everything. So from 3 o'clock until 7, I'm locked in trying to get all my stats everywhere. I've got the red zone going over here. One side I've got the local stuff over here. So it is a little chaotic, but I absolutely love it because it makes me make sure that I get everything that happened during the day on my sheet and I know exactly what's going on.
Let's tell, because you are good at doing the Sunday night pregame. Let's do the Thursday night pregame now with the Bengals and Ravens. I want to kick things off with Khalil Herbert, his impact on Chase Brown. Permar99 already posting and watching pregame warmups. It seems like Khalil Herbert is going to have some kind of a role. Not to the point. Now, did you say earlier you're starting Herbert this week?
Yeah, I'm starting Herbert this week. Balky,
Right.
listen, I am a 0 RB drafter in the worst kind of way.
Yeah.
And so when you do stuff like that, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So here we are.
And you still may be living by the sword. Like, we'll see what happens with Herbert tonight. This could end
Exactly.
up paying. Like, if he gets 10 points, you're going to be thrilled.
If he gets in the end, if he falls into the end zone, I will be so happy. I mean, I got a little note on my phone today saying that he's been just aggressively working to get caught up with this offense.
Yeah.
And that's all I needed. So
and that's the thing. Like, I think most people are probably not playing him. I did try to pick him up in, like, he was like available as a free agent in like 5 of my leagues. I didn't even check to see if I got him in any because I wasn't planning on playing him this week. I did have to look at it though tonight because I'm in a bad spot in a few leagues and where I might have to play Herbert. Did not come to that, but I just think the majority of people are looking tonight, not necessarily what Herbert can do for them, but what Herbert is going to do to Chase Brown. And for me, I don't think there's any league, and I have Chase Brown in probably like 9 leagues. I want to say 8 or 9 leagues. He's starting for me everywhere. The addition of Herbert is not dissuading me from playing Chase Brown this week.
No, I think you're definitely playing Chase Brown. I mean, he's earned that this year.
Mhm.
He's absolutely earned a starting spot in your lineup, no matter what the matchup is. So I think you have to start him. I think with Khalil Herbert, for me, so far in Chicago, he had 8 carries, 16 yards, and a touchdown. The Bears are only rushing 43% of the time there, and when they were doing it, they weren't even that effective. They had a lot of guys back there with Swift, Johnson, even Travis Homer is still back there, and then you got Caleb Williams running around. So, I think for me, like Herbert going to, the Bengals, when you take a look at that running back room, it's literally Chase Brown and Zach Moss. And now Zach Moss is gone, out for the season. Zach Moss was getting 35% of the carries. So if you're telling me that Khalil Herbert's going to come in and get some kind of something like that eventually, I am absolutely happy to put him in lineups and see where that goes. But I don't necessarily think that he comes in and gets any more than that. It affects Chase Brown any more than it was with Zach Moss back there, although I do think that Herbert's probably a little bit more talented than Zach Moss.
Let's talk about we talked about the backfield. Let's talk about the wide receiver room. And this is what Permar was kind of referring to earlier. That's Jeremy Fowler report for ESPN. That Jermaine Burton apparently had a locked in week of practice after he was the healthy scratch in week 9 for missing the walkthrough on Saturday. And the Bengals are, quote, counting on him to be a factor, end quote, against the Ravens. No T. Higgins. We know this tonight. This does not make me feel great. Similar, like Jimmy Williams just pointing out, Khalil Herbert has that bear and I'm expecting a TD. He jokes about that. Well, maybe he's not joking about that. But if Herbert was to steal a goal line touchdown from Chase Brown, like that would be awful. Because now we'd have to factor that into whether we're playing Chase Brown in future weeks. Similar to what happens if Burton is coming out of nowhere tonight and he catches 5-6 balls for like 70 yards and a touchdown, because that's probably not going to hurt Jamar Chase. It's probably going to hurt Mike Gesicki, and now we have to rethink Mike Gesicki a little bit. I'm still playing Gesicki in every league I have. In fact, I'm starting him over like Jake Ferguson we talked about earlier, TJ Hawkinson. I have him over Dalton Kincaid. I'm playing Gesicki over this week as well. So I think when we talk about the whole Jermaine Burton thing, you probably got to be in a bad spot in order to play him. I understand that this is good for him tonight. Still very, very hesitant to play him tonight, even without T. Higgins, Stacy.
I mean, I would certainly hope that he was locked in this week, considering you got pictures of him showing up in pajamas. He's over at the casino, spending his signing bonus down there. I just, that's unacceptable behavior for me. And if he isn't locked in, then the Bengals got to seriously think about what they're going to do with him long term. So he better be out there and ready to show and prove that he is capable and worthy of being on the NFL field. Burrow, I did not seem really thrilled with him either last week. So I just kind of wonder, like, are they going to, he is going to be out there, he is going to be playing, but are they rewarding that with numerous targets, with, making him the focal point of the offense? I don't think so. I can't see where they would. You've got Andre Achilles there. That's a guy who is, by all accounts, absolutely beloved in the locker room. Works hard.
And Burrow's been throwing to him. Like
Exactly.
Burrow's,
Burrow likes him. And, he has been boomer bust. I get it. Yoshibas is a great best ball guy, 100%. It's a little risky to put him in your lineups every week. But again, this is going to be a total barn burner. I totally think this is going to be a ton of points scored. Like I said, they had 79 points scored in week 5. Burrow threw for 5 touchdowns in that week. He threw for 5 touchdowns last week. In week 5, Yoshi only got 2 targets for 39 yards, but T was playing in that game, and obviously he's going to be out, so you're going to have to look for other options. And I just think Andre Yoshibis has come in. He's shown he can be the consistent guy. I really think it is hopefully going to be a Gesicki game, because I've really just got so much writing on that since he's been so productive with T out. But for me, it's a Gesicki Yoshibis, and then Burton kind of coming in as the low man on the totem pole for me at this point.
And we could be wrong about that. I mean, I have confidence in Chase and I have confidence in Gesicki. After that, I don't know. Burton, maybe. Yoshibas, maybe. I don't know. But I do. Gesicki, I think, is the interesting one because in an FFPC league where I don't think anybody drafted Gesicki as their starting tight end. I shouldn't say anybody. Somebody might have. But now, I mean, given that you have the tight end premium aspect, and given that you have 2 flexes, Stacy, how close is Gesicki as a must-start tight end in the FFPC this week? There's not a whole lot of tight ends I'd be playing ahead of him tonight.
He's definitely a must-start for me, and especially when you've got the 2 flex spots there beside your tight end. I mean, you can, if you have another tight end on your team that you trust that could have a good game, why not start both of them at this point? I mean, he's somebody that I'm starting over wide receivers just because of the matchup, because of T being out. Because he has shown consistently when T is out, he is going to be a very productive tight end. So in those even in non-tight end formats or premium formats, I'm starting him, but especially in a tight end premium format.
We've been talking about the Bengals. Let's shift to the other side of the field and talk Ravens. Keaton Mitchell has been activated from injured reserve, and he is going to be playing tonight against Cincinnati. He tore his ACL in week 15 last season. He comes back to a backfield that now has somebody named Derrick Henry playing in front of him. He is no longer the starter like he was down the stretch last year. Great change of pace option. I'm curious to see what happens, not to Derrick Henry's game, but maybe more so to Justice Hill, where I think we could see something from Mitchell tonight that might make Justice Hill droppable in 12-team leagues tonight. Your thoughts on what we're going to enjoy when we see Keaton Mitchell take the field tonight? Slow start, probably not a lot of snaps, but maybe he could flash tonight.
He could. I mean, remember he had that really explosive game in week 9 last year against Seattle. He went for 138 yards and a touchdown. Super efficient runner last season, doing 8.4 yards per attempt. So I liked what I was seeing from Keaton Mitchell last season. Very excited for him to start the year here in week 10. It's the Derrick Henry show forever and always in Baltimore right now, right? But he could come in, he could get some, points there. Henry does have to rest every once in a while. But Justice Hill, I think for me, where his usage really comes in is not so much in the rushing game because he's only got 119 yards total this year. He's rushing 3.7 yards per attempt, no touchdowns. But where he shines more is in the passing game. He's got 272 receiving yards or 2 touchdowns. He's got more yards than Isaiah Likely does at this point. Given that there's so many teams on a bye this week that have good running backs with, Green Bay, I was going to say Vegas, but really not so much Vegas, Cleveland, Seattle, you might have to flex Justice Hill and throw him in this week. But that's kind of where his usage and where his production is going to come from. So, I think they've got a lot of good, talented players there in Baltimore in their backfield. I think they all have different uses, which makes them all a little bit, it makes it hard to decide who's going to be the fantasy relevant one, every week. And obviously I'm not talking about Derrick Henry because he's fantasy relevant every week.
Right. I would ask you whether Justice Hill is flex worthy. I'm not going to ask you whether you should start him at running back because in one of my KFFSC dynasty leagues, I have to start Justice Hill, not as a flex, but as a running back. I have Alexander Madison on bye, Zach Moss now on IR, and then Trey Benson and Jalen Wright just not doing enough. So I'm hoping Hill catches a touchdown. I think he is flex worthy tonight. It sounds like you're playing him in at least one lineup as well, Stacy. Total is high, 53. We're just hoping for a touchdown for Hill. He has 2 games already this season with 6 or more catches. He has not hit that 6 threshold since September, but maybe tonight's the night the stars can align. I wouldn't advocate Hill being a flex, but I think he could be if you need it.
Yeah, if you have to, I actually am starting him in a fantasy pros team
Oh,
this week.
cool.
Yeah, so I'm right there with you, Balky. But yeah, I mean, I think he's flex worthy this week. I think you can do it if you need to. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. He does have some upside there, and he's gotten in the end zone. So yes, you could do it. You probably don't feel great about it, but it's not there are worse things, I think, than having to play Justice Hill in a game that's going to be a shootout.
Yeah, I mean, if the total on this was like 39 or something, I'd be like, oh God, this is going to be awful, But 53, yeah, I can get on board with just about anybody in a total of 53 points. Speaking of just about anybody, Deontay Johnson, in his debut with the Ravens last week, did not see any targets. He logs 13 snaps. John Harbaugh said before the game he wanted to get 10 to 15 snaps for Johnson. He was right smack dab in the middle of that. This is a short week. I don't know how acclimated he is to that offense even still. Zay Flowers is running about as pure as he ever has in his career. How do you think Deontay Johnson impacts Zay Flowers' numbers tonight? For me, unless you have the elite of the elite at receiver, you're still going to play Flowers. But what are your expectations for these two guys tonight? Again, in what should be a high-scoring game.
I guess my concern with Deontay Johnson, right, is that Steelers were okay with saying, see you later. You got Carolina that parted with him after 8 games, so that's not great either. So, he just keeps kind of moving team to team to team. He hasn't had a 1,000-yard season since 2021. He could go 8 for 100 yards. He could go 1 for 17 yards. And those are actually stats from this season. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Baltimore. I don't look for a huge impact, maybe throughout the end of the rest of the season. I don't think what he is going to get out of this offense is going to be enough to make me consider ever benching Zay Flowers. Right now Zay Flowers is getting 20% of the targets this year. He's had 6 double-digit fantasy points or fantasy point weeks and 400-plus yard games this season. I don't necessarily think that Deontay Johnson's going to come in and cause a significant decrease in that kind of production from Zay Flowers.
There is one league that I'm in because of injuries and buys. I have Tyler Lockett on a bye. I don't know if CeeDee Lamb's going to play this week. And I already have Brandon Ayuk on IR. I have Mike Evans, who is out this week already, or probably going to be out this week. So I am playing both Zay Flowers and Deontay Johnson on that team, which is going to be interesting. I do have Lamar Jackson as my quarterback, so I'm rooting for the Ravens to score 40 points tonight, and that team could be in pretty good shape. We'll see what happens.
Maybe Jamar Burton or Jermaine Burton's available. You check waivers.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm. Right after, no, I can't do it. I'm gonna have to do it while I talk to you here. Let's answer a couple of questions from the YouTube chat. Prime GTSS has Joe Burrow, Saquon Barkley, Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, AJ Brown, and Cooper Kupp. Unbelievable lineup. I think he's just bragging. No, you don't put Hopkins or Mooney in. I would play all those guys over Hopkins and Mooney. Prime GTSS watching us on Twitch tonight, which is awesome. Let's see. Ken Walker is on bye for Michael Kenzel. He has to use Devin Singletary or Roschon Johnson. Which one is a better start this week? Again, Michael, I think we share the same thoughts as you. We don't like this at all. I lean towards Singletary here, even as good as Tracy's been. It is a Europe game, which I think you want the craziness if you have to start Devin Singletary, right? Or Roschon Johnson. I lean towards Singletary, but I could go either way on this, Stacy.
I think Singletary for me. I think he's proven a little bit more than Roschon has so far, and I mean, you definitely want to be the Elmo with the flames in the background with the chaos. Exactly. You've got to start those guys.
That is the logo for the NFL Europe series. Is you have Elmo with the flames in the background? Well chosen. The question we got from Jimmy Williams with getting back to Deontay Johnson, with Isaiah likely out, will Johnson see more work? I don't necessarily think one affects the other. I think it's possible that he could, but I think the difference is really negligible there. I'm not really seeing whether likely plays or not. I mean, Permar pointed out last week he ran 6 routes. That's not great out of 13.
Full back there.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. You got. Didn't he catch a touchdown from Lamar Jackson?
He did. He did. Yeah. Oh yeah. When we talk about Mark Andrews, I got some Charlie Kolar stats for you too.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, let's without further ado, no likely tonight. Mark Andrews, again, my local co-host, he thinks Andrews is going to go off tonight. Let's talk about the Charlie Kolar aspect here with no likely. How does that affect Andrews? How does it affect Kolar?
So in week 5 when they played the first time, and I love that they've already played each other. So now I have all these stats I can go back and look at from the last time. So Mark Andrews went 4 for 55, 0 touchdowns. The reason why he had 0 touchdowns was because Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar had 3 touchdowns in between the two of them. So listen, now Andrews only has Charlie Kolar to contend with. So I'm not sure who's going to get in the end zone. I feel like it's going to be Kolar in the most inconvenient way for fantasy managers because of course it would be. But I think Andrews is definitely going to get his. He has come on a lot more in the last few weeks. His numbers are not pretty, right? He's tied 22nd overall in receptions. But he's made up for that with getting in the end zone, okay? He's got 4 total touchdowns, tied at 3rd overall in the position, which is wild that he's got 4 touchdowns, and that's 3rd at the tight end position, okay? But do you know who he's tied with for touchdowns, Balky?
Charlie Kolar. I don't know.
Kate Otten.
Oh, Kate Otten. There you go. That makes more sense. Yeah,
exactly. We're just bringing it back to Kate Otten. Yeah.
The rich man's Charlie Kolar, aka Kate Otten. I was looking for the quote and I found it too. When Kolar caught that touchdown after the game, he said, "It's beautiful. I mean, they get so focused on Mark and Isaiah that they forget about the fat white guy," which is true because Kolar caught that touchdown. And it wasn't a short one, wasn't it?
No, I remember that. That was hilarious. Yeah, so you know something random is going to happen that's just going to be the bane of your fantasy existence.
Right.
It absolutely will happen. Just wait. Who knows what it will be, but it will happen.
Yeah, well, we could it could be Kolar going for 2 touchdowns and Jermaine Burton going over like 150 yards or something like that tonight. It's going to be fun. That game will kick off in about 4 minutes here. We'll tell you, you don't need to watch it. We're going to tell you all the meaningful plays that are going on while Stacy and I go all the way to the top of the hour here. That is your Thursday night football preview. Make sure you lock in those lineups here in the next couple minutes. Let's lock in a lineup in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. As a reminder, if you want to play in the FFPC Weekly Challenge, you can do so at myffpc.com, myffpc.com, or scan the QR code on the screen right in front of Stacy. You can scan that. That'll take you right to the FFPC Weekly Challenge entry site where you can register and get your teams going. You can play for as little as $35. You can win up to $2,500 as well. Play against 9 other teams, 29 other teams, or 99 other teams. You can play with kickers and defenses or without, whatever you want to do. myffpc.com is where to go. No stacking in this format, 1 player per team. Stacy is good enough to have submitted a lineup for us right now. This is with kickers or without kickers.
This is a slim format. I did a slim format.
Perfect. So we're going to be formulating an FFPC starting. This is a mirror of the FFPC World Famous Playoff Challenge. 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 4 flexes here. Let's go with, I'll tell you what, Stacey, you already formulated the team. How do you want to start this off?
You want to just kick it off with quarterback?
Fine by me.
Yeah, so I picked Josh Allen for my quarterback. I just feel like there's not really too many other guys that I would want from Buffalo. And feel as confident about them getting their points as I'm going to feel about our boy Josh Allen. Keon Coleman is kind of on the mend this week. Like, he hasn't been practicing. Dalton Kincaid's been a little iffy there, hasn't really been blown up. James Cook, you could definitely do that. He's a little touchdown dependent, though. So out of all those guys, if I'm looking at those matchups, there are some other players on other squads that I was really would rather have. So out of the quarterbacks, because you can only start 1 from each team.
Yeah.
Josh Allen feels really good to me. I like that spot. I like that pick.
And if you are playing, this is a Sunday lineup. Think about that because Jackson and Burrow, 2 of the top quarterbacks, are not available in the pool. Well, who else besides Allen? Well, you have Jalen Hurts, but they're like a 7.5-point favorite against Dallas. How involved is Jalen Hurts going to be in that game for 60 minutes? Whereas you have Josh Allen going up against the Indianapolis Colts, a game where they're only 4-point favorites. They are on the road, and Josh Allen may have to do a lot in that game. Amari Cooper, you didn't mention too, is dealing with that wrist.
That's right.
So he might have to do more with his legs in this game. And if you don't want to take Allen, Now you're into the Brock Purdy's of the world, the Jaden Daniels of the world, who's going up against the Steelers. And then you get into Darnold and Stafford. You get into Mayfield, Mahomes, Cousins, where all these guys have more question marks. So Josh Allen, you look at the matchup, you look at the team around him, it doesn't seem all that great, but it's weird to say it. The playoff or the quarterback pool on Sunday isn't as deep as you might think. So I like the Josh Allen call there for Buffalo. You want to do the running back style?
Yes. Okay. So speaking of Philly, because Jalen Hurts would have been my guy that I went with, absolutely. But I went with Saquon. Okay. RB2 in fantasy right now, total scoring so far this season. Let me see. I want to say it's like 20 something points per game. 20. Actually, he's RB3. I'm so sorry. He's RB3. No. There we go. I hadn't sorted my numbers right, Balky. He is RB2 with 22 points per game in fantasy this year. Love Saquon. So
he's also leading the league in reverse hurdles as well, too.
Oh my God. I've watched it 100 times and I still don't know how he did it. Like, it's unbelievable.
Did you see the, I don't know who took it, I think it was somebody on the Eagles staff, like showing the Eagles sideline, watching it. And Jordan Davis, the nose tackle, just turns around and shakes his head that is the look of the man who has seen this in practice before, and then seeing it out on the field. It's just like, it's just not fair what he was able to do. It's insane.
Absolutely. And then my second one, because you have to, because we talked about it earlier, I'm throwing CMC in there. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it, it's his first game back. Maybe they just feel like, hey, CMC, let's celebrate you being back on the team this year, getting, your first start. And it's a CMC kind of day. So I just felt really good about that, putting him in there. It's still showing him on the IR, but I have a feeling that's going to get fixed here in a couple.
It'll change, yeah. Getting back. So let me just talk about these running backs very briefly. Saquon Barkley, as much as I said it's a negative game script for Jalen Hurts, it should be a positive one for Saquon Barkley, a guy that could have a monster game against Dallas. And I don't know which defenders are going to be healthy and who's going to be out there for the Cowboys, but this is a game. Certainly, even though it's on the road, Barkley should have a big game. McCaffrey is interesting because I think in this format where everybody focuses on studs so much, he is a guy that is the chalkiest of the chalk play every single week, except this week. Because there are going to be people that will be too nervous to pick McCaffrey, not knowing what his role is going to be, not knowing, this guy hasn't played since last season. Is he really healthy? I mean, we know, we believe he is. We're being told he is, but still in our mind, I mean, it's human nature just to wonder how effective he's going to be and how healthy he's going to look out there. So if there was 1 week to grab McCaffrey, I think this is going to be his lowest owned FFPC Weekly Challenge week. I fully support McCaffrey out there. Here. So you got Allen, Barkley, and McCaffrey in the backfield. That is pretty talented. What about it's very good. It's very, very good. What are your perimeter receivers looking like here?
So I went with Justin Jefferson. Right. They're playing Jacksonville. Like I said, I'm going to take anybody who's playing Jacksonville. He's averaging 19.7 fantasy points per game. They are giving up an absurd amount of fantasy points to not only wide receivers, pretty much everybody. So I'm going to take anybody who's playing Jacksonville, especially when their name is Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. I think the thing with Jefferson, I think maybe it wasn't Permar. Somebody else brought it up in the chat room before, talking about maybe it rains or it could rain in Jacksonville. Well, yeah, that would stink. But at the same time, sometimes I think that favors the offense. Justin Jefferson doesn't strike me as a guy who is going to do his best Green Bay Packers impression of all their receivers last week who dropped passes in the rain. He's going to snare him. I think he's going to be very, very good this week. So, yeah, Jefferson for sure.
I can't remember what game it was, but they ask Justin Jefferson about a play that somebody made that they didn't quite come down with. I don't know, maybe it's Garrett Wilson, something like that, way early on in the season. And Justin Jefferson was like, look, no disrespect to that guy, but I'm Justin Jefferson. So, I mean, it doesn't matter it could be a snowstorm. I really don't care what it is. Justin Jefferson, I think, is going to have himself a fantasy day every single week. So speaking of Garrett Wilson, he's going to be my next pick. Threw him in here. He's only had one game under double-digit fantasy points this year, which I was a little surprised with considering the Jets and what a garbage or dumpster fire they are. But he's producing. He might be the only one on that team that's producing, but he is absolutely producing. So I felt comfortable there. I kind of wanted to go with guys that I felt were consistently producing every single week. And so I get it, right? Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, they're popular, but those guys are still putting it, up the points that you need to kind of come away with, the win here. Because you want to get as many points as you can. Like most of these, I've done a few of them so far. And like, if you're not scoring 200 points, you're not going to win. So you've got to make sure that the guys that you're getting are going to be ones that can and have produced those kind of numbers, throughout the year so far.
What about Garrett Wilson versus Devontae Adams? Was last Thursday night's game, was that enough for you to say, okay, Wilson's still the number one receiver on this team? That's who Rodgers is looking for, even more than Adams at this point.
Yeah, I think they can both eat there. It was really nice to finally see Devontae kind of have a great game, and be fantasy relevant. And it just a little nostalgia just kind of hit me too with going back to watching Rodgers and Devontae, back in the day. So that was really nice. But I think it kind of showed that, look, guys, we cannot be afraid that Adams coming into New York is gonna hurt Garrett Wilson. I think they can both survive and both be relevant.
I was just thinking about this too. Who would have thunk it after that unbelievable catch by Garrett Wilson on Thursday that would be the second most talked about highlight in the NFL for week 9 after what Barkley did. Just crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Jefferson and Wilson at receiver. Can I get your tight end here, Stacy?
Yeah. Oh, you know who it's going to be. Give me my boy Cade Otton.
Cade Otton. Here we go. Fire him up. I love it.
That's great. And if it hadn't been for the Thursday night game going, I probably would have put Gesicki in here if this game was being played on a Sunday. But Cade Otton's my guy, de facto number one Bucs offense. While Evans is hurt, Baker is throwing over 33 times per game, even when they're facing tough matchups, right? They faced off against Kansas City. It's a tough, defense there. He's still throwing the ball a ton. And, I think I was a little worried about that once, Godwin and Evans went down. Is he going to be relying more on the running game there? Is his throwing, going to decrease? And it hasn't. So I feel comfortable, throwing in Cade Otton even against a tough defense like San Francisco.
It's interesting too, when you think about Otton, I think that, and you said if it wouldn't have been Cade Otton, it would have been Mike Gesicki. And those are not, in our mind, those are not elite tight end plays, right? And if you're going to pivot somewhere to not have elite everywhere, I mean, Otton and Gesicki are pretty darn close to elite. And I don't think they're going to be highly owned. The guys that are going to be highly owned in this at tight end, you think about George Kittle is definitely one of them. Travis Kelce, I'm sure. Trey McBride, I think in some respects, but Otton is right up there, and maybe even better than all those guys this week as well. So we have your first 6 players here, Stacy. Let's get to the flexes. Who are we flexing out on this team?
So, this was a little different for me because usually I am quite the wide receiver fan over here, but I've got 2 running backs in my flex spots. I've got Joe Mixon. He's averaging 18.7 points per game. He's only had 2 weeks where he's been under 20 points per game. That average even is a little deceptive because he had one game where he only had 8 points, and that was at the beginning of the season. So that really is kind of what brought it down. The rest of his, production has been very high this year. So they're going to be playing Detroit. That should be a really fun game. I think is that the Sunday night game?
Sunday night and the total 48.5. That's got shootout potential. I always say the stars shine under the lights of primetime football. So fire up your Texans and Lions. Absolutely. I'm glad to see we got a piece of that game here on this team. Maybe more if we get a Lion going.
We got one more. We got more
okay.
coming.
All right. Okay.
With the Lions. I'll give you on the other side of the ball. I got Detroit. I got Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay.
He actually. I don't even, maybe I should say this because we all know how personally he takes things. But he might be the weakest link on this lineup, I think, once you look at it all together. He's just a dog, he has absolutely just gone out there and just absolutely produced, even though his targets have decreased a little bit. They've been relying more on their running game. You can kind of see that with the, decrease in production for Sam Laporta too. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy that you can just trust to go out there. And I wanted a piece of that Detroit game, and I just wasn't quite sure about throwing in another running back, especially between Montgomery and Gibbs. But so that's why I went ahead with St. Brown and threw him in there. And just hey to my girls, Ann and Wendy, over here hanging out tonight. Love those girls. They are part of our, we call it Unwind community. Bulky with like all the women in fantasy football. We all get together like once a month on Zoom and just kind of hang out and chat and, just kind of like build those relationships. And they are two of my favorite people.
I'm glad they're hanging out and they made the right choice to watch you tonight on this show, which is fantastic. So not only are they great friends, but they have excellent taste in fantasy football shows tonight too. So that's yes. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Wendy. We appreciate you for sure.
Yeah.
I want to just touch on the Amon-Ra St. Brown thing. He does. I love players that take things so personally. Because I think it really shows on the field, and it definitely shows on the field with St. Brown too. I have been somewhat disappointed in him this year, but not to the level where I'm going to say he's a bust or anything like that. I just feel like Detroit has been in a lot of good games this year where they haven't had to deploy Sam Laporta. They haven't had to deploy Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's been on Gibbs, Montgomery, and then that defense a lot. So I'm with you. If we're going to pick a line here, Gibbs and Montgomery, I don't know. I don't feel one over the other in this game. And then Laporta too is a guy that, quite frankly, I'm probably benching in a couple of leagues in favor of Otten, Gesicki, TJ Hawkinson this week. So yeah, I love the St. Brown call here.
Yeah, listen, it hurts my heart to have to bench Sam Laporta. But it's not him. It's not that he's not
right. They haven't had that.
You're right. They have not had to use him.
I blame how good the Lions are. That's what I blame.
Yeah. And I wish I could remember. I heard it earlier on another show this week. I don't remember the exact number, but they were talking about like how fewer throws Jared Goff is having to make this year as opposed to last year when he was just like one of the top leaders in passing. And they haven't had to use him that way. They haven't needed that from him. So that's the reason why your offense there is kind of decreasing. Not with any. It's not an indictment on any of their players or any of their talent or anything like that.
He's been unbelievable this year, and it's like I don't know how many games this year you could count his total incompletions for that game on one hand. It's high percentage. I saw the stat that I think St. Brown and him, I don't know if it's the record, but they've connected on 30 consecutive pass attempts, which is unbelievable. And you think about all the timing that goes on and how tough the defenses are in the NFL. It's very, very difficult to do something like that. And yet they're pulling it off. You're pulling off a fantastic roster here tonight, Stacy. Who's next on the flex list?
All right, I got to go. I would have loved to throw Jaden Daniels in my quarterback, but I decided I'd rather have a piece of Terry McLaurin. Haven't had him in any of these kind of lineups yet so far this year, and that's probably been to my detriment because since week 3, he's been absolutely unstoppable. Even though, and they've faced good defenses this year too, so it's not like they're just playing, terrible teams. They faced Baltimore, Cleveland, Chicago, and he still had double-digit fantasy points in all 3 of those weeks. So this is a guy Jaden Daniels has had a complete connection with. He is absolutely going to Terry. And I think Terry's got to be just like living his best life. He finally has a quarterback that is good, that's throwing to him. They're using him the way that he should have been used his entire career. And it's really nice to see, him having the season that we all have wanted him to have this whole time. So I love Terry McLaurin.
It's going to be a fascinating matchup this week when you have that Pittsburgh defense and everything that they're able to throw at opposing quarterbacks versus Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels, and then maybe McLaurin and Joey Porter Jr. This will be a great test for both teams, and we'll see what happens going forward in that Washington Pittsburgh game this week. Okay, we have one spot left on the roster. Stacy, who are you awarding it to?
I am giving it to my favorite dual threat running back over here, Alvin Kamara.
Yep.
Like I said, the big nasty rivalry game with Atlanta this week. Kamara has just been absolutely on fire. It's like all of our old running backs have just been showing up and saying, "Hey, we're not dead yet. You can't kick us off the cliff at 30 anymore. Like we are here. We are producing." I don't see why that's going to stop this week at all. Right now, he's getting you 21.2 fantasy points on average every single week. So, and then PPR, he gives you that option as well, with those receptions. So I just love it. And then like we talked about earlier, right? You've got Olave that, God, I can't imagine a circumstance where he plays this week. You've got injuries all over the place. Who knows what's going on with Kendry Miller? I think Jamal Williams is hurt. Not that either one of them has been any kind of option, in the running back room. So Kamara's the guy, I think. So that's why I couldn't help but throw him in the lineup, figure out a way to get him in there. So that's my squad, Balky.
Kamara, 27.5 points last week, did not score a touchdown. That was 27.5, original meat and potato fantasy football points, 6 for 60, 155 yards on the ground. Insane stuff. So here's the lineup from Stacy Perez for her weekly challenge in the FFPC for week 10. The quarterback is Josh Allen. We are looking at running back Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, and Alvin Kamara. The wide receivers are Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, Terry McLaurin, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Cade Otton is indeed the tight end. That's who we're rolling with here tonight. The Bengals just had it 4th and goal, and from the Baltimore 2, it was incomplete to Chase Brown in the end zone. However, defensive holding called on Baltimore, 1st and goal at the 1, and who but Chase Brown runs it right guard in the end zone. Touchdown Cincinnati. They take a 6-0 lead. They went right down the field, 9:23 to go in the first quarter, extra point pending. Chase Brown, 3 carries, 7 yards, along with a catch for 7 yards. Jamar Chase, 2 for 32. Yoshibas, 1 for 19. Burton gets a target. He doesn't catch it. Mike Gesicki, 1 catch for 3 yards. And maybe the 2024 MVP in Lamar Jackson getting ready to take the field down 7-0 the Cincinnati Bengals here. That is your weekly challenge. Like the Prime Video broadcast, let's step out and take our final break of the night. When we come back, Stacy, I'm going to throw some start sits at you, including but not limited to Austin Eckler, Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz, and Tua Tagovailoa. We'll get to all those guys and much more. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Stacy Perez and Eric Balkman coming back with one more segment for you tonight.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. That is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. There's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl. And when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. He was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game.
Yeah.
That they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
We have 27 minutes until the top of the hour. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm your host, Eric Balkman. She is Stacy Perez from Fantasy and Frames. Catch her on the Fantasy and Frames Waiver Show Tuesday nights, as well as the Player Profiler Sunday Tailgate Show, 7:30 Sunday nights as well. Let's and follow her on the X, Stacy_Perez83. Let's talk about the weekly challenge just real briefly. Stacy just put together a fantastic lineup. If you want to duplicate it, hey, feel free. She won't be offended. Or submit your own. myffpc.com, myffpc.com. 10 or 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses. Only one player per team. Enter for as little as $35. Went up to $2,500 now. myffpc.com, myffpc.com, or simply scan the QR code that Matt has thrown up on the screen. That will take you right to the registration page, and you can check it out there and enter your teams. Too late for the Thursday contest, but the Sunday contest will go all the way till 1 p.m. In the afternoon. So, Stacy, let's do some start sits here as we take it into the end of the first quarter in the Thursday night football game. Running backs this week: Najee Harris or Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard did not practice today because of a foot injury. He was limited yesterday, so this is actually a downgrade for him. This could be a rest day. This could be load management. Brian Callahan, who is the head coach of Tennessee, said that he wanted to reduce how much he's been using Pollard. We'll have to watch it on the Friday injury report. For all intents and purposes for this conversation, let's assume he practices tomorrow. Who would you rather play between Najee Harris, who is at the Commanders, or Tony Pollard, who is at the Chargers?
So if Pollard is good to go, I'm going to take Pollard. They can, I think Harris might be limited a little bit by that Washington defense. They've been a little bit tougher than you expected. Pollard has actually had a better fantasy season than Najee had. Which is a little disappointing for me because I had Najee everywhere.
Right. He was super cheap. He was super cheap in drafts.
I mean, you could get him for nothing.
Yeah.
Which I guess everybody else knew better than me. So, but if Pollard is injured, or if he's not going to play, if it looks like it's getting a little worse, I mean, it's it's like his foot. Do you remember the exact injury
for Pollard?
Yeah.
I'd have to look it up. I'll look it up real quick.
So something obviously that running backs are going to be putting a lot of stress on. So yeah, I mean, I think you just have to monitor this one. But if he's healthy, if he can go, it's Pollard for me. But if he's going to be limited in any kind of way, then I would feel more comfortable with Najee.
So I'm trying to find it right now, and I see a high ankle sprain, but that was not this year.
I thought it was something to do. I'm going to try to look too now because now I'm curious.
It wasn't like a plantar fascia or anything like that, was it? I don't like a midfoot sprain. I don't remember anything like that. But we'll see what happens. By the way, the Ravens are 3-0 as they could not get it done. Derrick Henry getting a 6-yard gain on second down, but a deep incomplete pass to Rashad Bateman and then a Justice Hill for no gain run on third down sealed the deal. The Bengals now have it at their own 10-yard line, 7:54 to go in the first. They lead 7-0. Moving on to Austin Eckler and Bucky Irving. Let's talk about them. If you can only play one this week, is it Eckler at home against the Steelers, or is it Bucky Irving, who's also dealing with an injury himself, at home against the San Francisco 49ers?
So I think what I want to know is Brian Robinson fully healthy. He didn't play last week. Is he going to play this week? If he is, then I'm not interested in taking Eckler. I'd rather take my chances with Bucky, just because he's been super explosive, very efficient runner, more efficient than Rachaad White. I think I really like the big play potential he has. I'm in Tampa, Balky, so I'm getting all the Bucs info over here. I went to training camp and I got to watch Bucky Irving earlier this year. And I just really impressed by him. Rachaad White is obviously the number one there, but he is just consistently inefficient. Bucky has been, even Sean Tucker has been more efficient than, Rachaad White. So I like Bucky Irving that would really be, that would kind of do it for me. Is if Brian Robinson is healthy, if he's going to go, then I would prefer Bucky Irving. If he's not going to go, or if there's even questions about him not playing, because that kind of came up as a surprise on Sunday. I don't think any of us knew that for sure that he wasn't going to play. So then I would throw Eckler in there if that was the situation.
We're looking at Brian Robinson getting 3 limited practices last week, ultimately setting out the game. Did not look good in pregame warmups. What's he doing this week? 2 limited practices so far. So I would imagine that he is trending in the wrong direction based on what we saw last week. But that's not to say he can't play this week. But I'm with you. If he does go, I don't want to mess around with Eckler. Just give me Bucky Irving because I know what his role is going to be. And Bucky Irving's dealing with something too. I should look that up. In fact, that's what I was going to do. I totally forgot. Bucky Irving right now has a toe injury. I don't know if he practiced today. He got in a limited practice yesterday. However, keep in mind, while toe was like, God, we never want to hear that with running backs. This is something he's been dealing with the last 3 weeks. So, and he's been playing through it and playing pretty well as well. By the way, just coming up 1 minute ago, I'm not sure who's reporting this. CeeDee Lamb says he expects to play against the Eagles this week, catching balls from Cooper Rush. The quote from Lamb: "I've taken a big step throughout the week in these last 2 to 3 days, if you will. I'm good. I was out there running today, getting right." Okay, there you go. So this is Cooper Rush. This is music to his ears that he's going to have Lamb up there. Or at least, again, this is the player talking about his injury, which I usually take with a grain of salt, but he says he expects to play here. Getting back to running backs, Ray Davis, who broke James Cook owners' hearts last week, that play, or Raheem Mostert, who is going to be going up against the Los Angeles Rams in Southern California this week. You have Ray Davis in Indianapolis. Is it Mostert over Davis for you, Stacy?
It's actually going to be, I think, Davis over Mostert, because I never like an East Coast team traveling to the West Coast and having to play. That's usually a recipe for disaster. And also, if you take a look at Mostert, you kind of think of him and Devon Achane as really kind of having like sharing the load there in Miami. But when you look at Mostert's production, he's only had 2 weeks and this is just taken out of the weeks that he's actually played and hasn't been injured, but only 2 weeks of double-digit fantasy points. So you don't love that at all. And Miami's offense has just been awful. And now Tua is back, I get it, but at the end of the day, I think if there's a different option besides Mostert, I think you have to seriously look at it. And I really do like Ray Davis's potential a little bit more there. Just like that matchup a little bit better for him. He does have that kind of explosive ability just like he did last week, just go off and get you, I think it was like 17 points, something like that in fantasy. So I think I'm going to throw Ray Davis in over Mostert this week.
I think he's it's weird to say this given Mostert's penchant for big plays, but I think Davis might be the more explosive player at this point. And I always say it's a young man's game too. So I fully support that. Permar was bringing this up, I think last week or maybe Tuesday night, that even with the return of Tunga Bailoa to Miami, you're still seeing more of an emphasis on tossing the balls to Jonnu Smith and to Devon Achane and Mostert and Jalen Wright rather than Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Not to say that they're not getting anything, but you would think that they should be getting the majority of the passes, and that hasn't been the case. There's been more of an emphasis on getting the ball out of the backfield or to Jonnu Smith this week, which would be another reason to like Mostert here. But you're going to play Davis over Mostert, and I can get behind that for sure. Wide receivers, let's shift to them. Quentin Johnston, the guy that everybody left for dead after 2023, that has been scoring, 4 touchdowns now this season?
Yeah.
And by the way, Quentin Johnston this week is getting the Titans at home. Or Jamison Williams, who is coming off his latest suspension. He is in Houston for that Sunday night game this week. Could be a shootout. Your thoughts here. Who would you rather play between Johnston and Williams?
Oh, it's kind of crazy here, but I think I'm going to go with Johnston. He was left for dead after last season, and quite frankly, deservedly so. But it's really nice to see when a player can kind of make a change in their second year and kind of just come back and do better. And that's what he's done. And I think nobody was taking him in any of the drafts this year, because why would you? He was terrible. But he really has just, I don't know what kind of work he did in the off season, like how he's tried to, prepare better for this year or just improve his game, but he's done it. And I think you have to, really kind of see now that it's not just a flash in the pan. Those first couple games, maybe it was like, oh, well, anybody can have a big day, right? But he's done it more consistently, and I really like that. The Chargers are throwing more. They are throwing more in their last, I think, 3 games or so. Herbert's throwing about 30 times a game. He's looking more comfortable in this offense. So for me, I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston. Jamison Williams is just a little too volatile for me. You never know what's going to happen there. And especially we spent a lot of time talking about the Lions, earlier. they're not relying on, the passing offense as much. Goff isn't throwing as much. So, even though Jameson Williams is back now, and, should be seeing some targets, I think if I've got to choose, I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston. It's just the potential to have a more, production rather than Jameson Williams this week.
I think when you talk about these two players specifically, it's volatility is the name of the game, right? Because these are two big play receivers, and it's very, very difficult to predict big plays, right? Johnston is by no means threatening Ladd McConkey as the number one receiver in the Chargers offense, and yet Johnston still seems to come up with big plays from time to time.
Right.
Jameson Williams, and I think this is the difference for me. We already kind of know what's happening with the Chargers passing game. In regards to Detroit, they need to work Laporta. They are going to work Laporta and St. Brown in more so before they start dealing with Jameson Williams, right? And that's what I think shifts it to me, where I'd rather play Johnston over Williams. Williams is a dart throw this week, so I'm not down with him. Permar was talking up Noah Brown in here earlier too. Let's talk about him right now. Noah Brown against the Steelers this week, or Demario Douglas. And I have to look this up. Demario Douglas is in Chicago this week.
Yes.
Last week, 9 targets. 7 of them he catches just for 35 yards, but I never concerned myself too much with the yards. I just love the targets and the catches here. Noah Brown or Demario Douglas, who's the correct receiver to play in week 10, Stacy?
Oh, this is terrible because my heart says Demario Douglas. Like, he's been such a favorite of mine since last year. It seems like he's really got a good connection with Drake May. As long as Drake May is back there, I feel comfortable starting Demario Douglas because he is getting all those targets, right? It's like him and Hunter Henry. Those are the two guys that you can kind of reliably, feel good about in the Patriots offense. But then you got Noah Brown coming over here, having 2 great weeks back to back. Something to also be a little concerned about is when you take a look at, who the Patriots are playing. You're playing the Bears. And, listen, I'll joke about the Bears all day long because I'm a Packer fan. But I'll tell you this, is that they are only giving up the lowest amount of fantasy points to opposing teams' wide receivers. So that is not something that makes you feel pretty good about starting Demario Douglas up. If you have the option of starting a Noah Brown instead, even though they are facing Pittsburgh, I think that's still going to be a pretty exciting game. And Brown has consistently for the past 2 weeks put up big numbers. So I think I'm going to have to go with Noah Brown. Although it's just Demario Douglas probably any other week, but this week.
We were talking about a league that you recommended I search to see if Jermaine Burton was available in that league. I searched in Dynasty League. He was not available. However, Noah Brown is available in that league. And I did put in last break, on my phone, I placed a couple of dollars bidding on him, and we'll see what happens on Saturday if I get him or not. But Noah Brown is a guy I'm starting to like. I think, like, in my mind, when I think Noah Brown, I think of that Hail Mary, just the random catch, right? But it's been more than that, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
He's more incorporated into that offense than a lot of people give him credit for. So, yeah, I'm on board with Noah Brown here over Demario Douglas. Last wide receiver one I want to get to, Jalen Coker, the player that a lot of people were bending over backwards to try to pick up off the FFPC waiver wire last week in Carolina. Now, Adam Thielen, it does not look like he is coming back this week. Deontay Johnson is now in Baltimore playing against the Bengals tonight. What if we pit Jalen Coker against Demarcus Robinson, a guy who has been the bane of my existence because I have had Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua going in a lot of leagues ever since they returned. And every time I watch a Rams game or if I'm watching on Red Zone, that number 15 is collecting all these touchdowns and all these catches, driving me nuts. I think for that reason, I'm going to play Robinson, even though Nacua and Kupp are going to be healthy and at least start this game unless Nacua gets, ejected again. I do like them better than Coker. Again, this is a Europe game. For the Panthers. So give me Robinson over Coker. Your thoughts?
My gosh, I could have just died when Nacua got ejected last week. That was terrible. I drafted him in a main event league, and I was so excited to finally get to start him, and then I nearly lost it. I think you got to go to Marcus Robinson over this one again with the heebie-jeebies going across overseas over there. Don't love it, especially it's the Panthers, guys. Demarcus Robinson here had 9 targets last week, 27 points. Is he going to do that every week? No, but he is getting a significant number of targets, and you love to see that. The Rams have been on fire lately. Stafford is looking great. You know, I feel way more comfortable with Demarcus Robinson, knowing that he's probably going to put up more. The potential for one of them to put up a big fat 0 is a little bit more, I think, shifts towards the Jalen Coger side than it does the Demarcus Robinson side.
I'll give you an update on the Thursday night game here. The Bengals had it 4th and 3 from the Ravens 41. Joe Burrow passes a deep toss to Jermaine Burton downfield. Incomplete. The Ravens take over at their own 41 on downs. And let me tell you something. It has been all Cincinnati so far. They have held the ball for 10 minutes and 35 seconds. The Ravens just possessing it for 129. 8 first downs already for the Bengals and 0 for the Ravens. We'll see what happens when they take over here with 2:56 to go in the first quarter. Jamar Chase is now up to 3 catches to 39 yards. Chase Brown and Mike Gesicki have a pair of catches, and Chase Brown 6 carries for 22 yards. No Khalil Herbert sighting yet, and knock on wood, hopefully we don't see it for everybody out there, except for the one person I'm cheering for Khalil Herbert for, and that's Stacy Perez, who has him in one of our lineups this week. But I just don't want to, like, I get it if he plays a series or something just to give Brown a breather. I just don't want to see any touchdown vultures or anything like that. That's my biggest thing tonight.
Well, I was just going to say, just let him get all the way down there and let him fall in the end zone, and then you don't have to look at him the rest of the game. Like, give me the
if that's it, sure. Yeah. Given how many points should be scored tonight, if Herbert takes one of them, okay, that's fine. Whatever, I'll live with it. But at least for the first quarter, it's looking like it is Brown, and more Brown. We'll see what happens going forward. Shifting to tight ends.
Yes.
Zach Ertz, would you play him this week, Stacy? If you drafted Ertz as your backup to Sam Laporta, would you play Laporta Sunday night at Houston, or would you play Zach Ertz at home against the Steelers?
Yeah, I gotta go with Zach Ertz, and I just hate it. I hate it so much. But I gotta go with Zach Ertz here. Laporta, like we talked about, he hasn't been used like he was used last year. You know, and I think we all expected a little bit of regression from Laporta, because how can you really replicate like such an outstanding rookie season? But I didn't expect it. He's borderline unstartable at this point. You know, he has had a couple good games. You just don't know when those are coming. So, you know, I think Ertz has been the more consistent player here. You know, I mean, Jane Daniels does look to him. He has been very fantasy relevant. I mean, even though I don't think a lot of people expected him to be. I know earlier in the, you know, before the season started, you're doing your off-season drafts, and you could get him for just free, you know, at the end. You know, everybody was really high on Ben Sinnott, as they should be. I think he's the future of the tight end there in Washington. But right now, it's Zach Ertz's role, and he's the tight end 1 there. And I think he's definitely done way more production wise than Sam Laporta has. So I think this is an easy one for me, as much as it just pains me.
Right. It's tough. Now, Ertz is coming off a bad game. 1 target. He catches it for 5 yards. But before that, 7 for 77, 4 for 40 and a touchdown, and 4 for 68. He was crushing it. Outside of last week, he was looking really good, dating all the way back to week 5 for sure. Pat Freiermuth going against Zach Ertz's team, the Commanders. Would you play him, or would you play Dalton Schultz, who is going up against Sam Laporta's Lions on Sunday Night Football? Freiermuth or Schultz for you, Stacy?
So, I mean, neither one of these guys I think is gonna, you know, win you your day, right? Freiermuth, I was hoping to have a little more production out of him with Arthur Smith moving over to Pittsburgh. But I think really, you know, kind of what has happened now is you've seen it spread around a little bit more, especially Darnell Washington getting a little more involved in the game. You know, so for me, it's going to be, out of these two, it's going to be Dalton Schultz, because you've got Collins out, you've got Diggs out, and I think we're all hoping that Collins will be back this week, but he hasn't practiced yet, so I'm not really hopeful that that's going to happen. You know, so you've just really got Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz there as 2 guys. So for me, it's going to be Dalton Schultz over Patty Fries, as I like to call him. But yeah, nice. Patty Fries. I got that from our good friend Steve Hawley. I heard him say that one time, and I just absolutely just took that and used it as my own now. But yeah, so I think Dalton Schultz is going to be the one for me this week.
Yeah, Schultz is a player that, again, we won't know what's going on with Collins officially until late Sunday afternoon. But my guess is he does not play, given that he hasn't practiced the last 2 days. I think was it Fowler or somebody called him a long shot? Maybe it was Field Yates called him a long shot for Sunday night. And
it would be great if he put me on. I couldn't imagine anything better than him playing in the Sunday night matchup against the Lions. But
it'd be fun. I mean, we're rooting for it. I just don't know if we'll see it this week. And Schultz should take advantage of that fantasy wise for sure. Tyler Conklin or Theo Johnson, the final FFPC tight end matchup we will look at here. Conklin at Arizona, Theo Johnson in Europe, in Germany, against the Panthers. Do you have a feeling here?
Oh, same thing, just with the weird overseas games. But Conklin's seeing 12% of the target share in that Jets offense. I like that a little bit better. Obviously, you've got Devontae Adams coming on now. But I still think there's a role for Tyler Conklin. Rodgers does like throwing to his tight end. He seems to have connected well with Conklin. He is using him. Conklin is, I think, still scoring in like the top 15 of tight ends in fantasy production wise. So I think I'm going to feel a little bit more comfortable with Tyler Conklin there as opposed to Theo Johnson. Theo Johnson got some nice usage last week. I think he got in the end zone as well.
He did.
But yeah, I think just for this specific week, I'm going to go Conklin over Johnson.
4 catches, 51 yards, and a touchdown for Theo Johnson in his best game in his young career as a pro. It was against the Commanders. I don't know. I look at that Giants offense. I feel like Neighbors is a stud. Wan'Dale Robinson, the PPR Ponzi scheme this year, which has been working out, and I'm fine with. Johnson is a little kind of like, I don't know what to expect. And admittedly, since Devontae Adams has come to New York, I think Conklin's in that territory too. Where I just don't know what to expect. This is a tough one for me. I'm going to lean towards Theo Johnson if for any other reason than weird things happen overseas, and maybe that pays off for Theo Johnson. I could easily see Conklin outperforming him as well.
Yeah,
it's a tough one, but it's why we talk about this on the show for sure. Let's do quarterbacks here. Some starter sits here. We've been talking a lot about the Commanders Steelers game. What about Jaden Daniels, a guy that was probably the 9th quarterback off the board, 8th quarterback off the board for the majority of the summer drafting season, or Brock Purdy, who was also drafted late. There are a lot of FFPC players out there that waited on quarterback and then went bang, bang with Jaden Daniels and Brock Purdy back to back. They both have exceeded expectations this year. Purdy probably has the better matchup. Is that enough for you to want to start him over Jaden Daniels this week?
And I love Brock Purdy, so I'm going to say Jaden Daniels, but that is not because I'm one of those Brock Purdy haters out there that he's just in the, like a system quarterback or anything like that. No, I just love Daniels because I love the points that you can get with his legs, the big play potential that he's got in him. He's the 4th highest scoring fantasy quarterback so far this season. And I just don't think that you can, discount that at all, even if it is against the Steelers this week. So I just love Jaden Daniels. I love what he brings. Love the potential that he gives you every single week to be, your game winner for you.
Did you draft a lot of Daniels this year in your leagues overall?
No, I really kind of stayed away from some of the rookies. I have very little Caleb Williams, very little Jaden Daniels, and I just hate myself for it.
Well,
now.
Not for very little Caleb Williams. You're thanking yourself for very little Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I've dropped him in a few places. I've had to, but yeah, man, Jaden Daniels is just. Gosh, I wish I had been brave enough to go all in on him because, gosh, he's so much fun to watch. And you've got to feel so good about yourself if you're a Commanders fan for like the first time in like decades, probably.
Mm-hmm. I want to stop with the quarterbacks. I want to go to Bisco, who's watching us on YouTube right now. Just got a trade offered. Bisco got one. Mark Andrews, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Kareem Hunt. That's what Bisco would be getting. Bisco would have to give up TJ Hawkinson and Jacoby Myers. Now, and he has Pacheco. Now, on the surface, I would say that I would totally do this deal because I think the best player in this is Harrison.
Right.
And you would be getting Harrison. You're also getting Hunt, which you'd say, oh, bulky, that's only going to be good for like another 2 or 3 weeks, and then Pacheco comes back. Okay, well, Bisco has Pacheco, so you're snaring that Kansas City backfield. And then I think it's debatable whether it's an upgrade or a downgrade from Hawkinson to Andrews. And because it's negligible, I think you pulled the trigger on this. I'd rather have Andrews, Harrison, and Hunt, and I'll give up Hawkinson and Myers for that.
Yeah, and I'm assuming this is in redraft and not like a dynasty.
Yes, I would assume that too. Yes.
Yeah, but if it's redraft, absolutely. Yeah, that was my first thought. Was like, you better smash that trade before he rethinks it, and like run away with what you got because, I absolutely for all of those same reasons. I mean, I think that's a great way to go. And honestly, do we really know that Pacheco is going to come back? after.
I mean, the reports were last week that within the next 2 to 3 weeks he should be back, and he's going to start practicing shortly. Even if that doesn't happen, you don't care anymore because you have Hunt, so it gives you the safety there.
Exactly.
And Bisco also has Evan Engram as well.
Oh,
So this is
smash that trade, brother. Do it right now.
Smash it. Absolutely. Matthew Stafford or Tua Tagovailoa. What if you have these two quarterbacks again? If you waited on quarterback, you might have this decision facing you this week. Stafford at home against the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa at the Rams. So these guys are playing each other. Which one would you rather have?
So, I think if it had been earlier in the season, I probably would have gone with Tua. But that injury it kind of scared me a little bit. And I know, to what we talked about earlier about that, they're not really passing the way that they had been historically, right? You're not seeing the kind of usage out of Hill and definitely not out of Waddle. That's for sure. I mean, Waddle's unstartable at this point. But what Stafford and the Rams have been doing, they have been absolutely just tearing it up the last few games. And now you've got Cooper Kupp back, you've got Puka back. They're fully loaded. All their weapons are ready to go. So for me, I mean, I think it's an easy choice to pick Stafford here. Just too many question marks going on with that offense. They just haven't been able to get on track at all. So I think you have to go Stafford here.
Total in that game is 50. The Rams are just a 1-point favorite. It's a Monday night game, which will be fun this week. So, I'm with you on Stafford. I would say I'd hate to pick Stafford because he doesn't run. Well, Tagovailoa doesn't really run either, so you're not missing out there.
Maybe he shouldn't.
And maybe that's a great point. Yeah. For me, it's Stafford. The force is complete right now in Los Angeles with Robinson, Nakua, Kyron Williams, and Cooper Kupp. So, I'm rolling with Stafford there as well. And then the final one we'll do tonight, Jared Goff or Aaron Rodgers, two guys that battled it out for a couple of times, a couple of years ago in the NFC North. Who would you rather play this week? Jared Goff Sunday night against the Houston Texans or Aaron Charles Rodgers at Arizona in the desert? Total on these games are very similar, 46.5 in the Jets, 48.5 in the Lions. The Lions are 3.5-point favorites. The Jets are 2-point favorites here. You have a feeling on whether Goff or Rodgers is the right guy this week?
So I know that we have talked a lot about the Lions and how Goff isn't throwing as much as he had previously. But I still think I'm going with Goff there. I think this is going to be a really great matchup against Houston. Rodgers hasn't really been himself this year. We haven't really seen the kind of production that we had hoped for. They are going out to Arizona. Don't love that. Across the country as always, gives you something, weird could happen there. It just seems, I don't know. I would love to pick Rodgers here because I think they've got some, great players now with Adams being there. And I think it is a good matchup against Arizona. I think they are going to score a lot of points there. I just can't pick Goff over him though this week.
I'm going to lean towards Goff here. And the reason is that offense has been so hyper efficient. And they're just completing passes literally like it's a bodily function right now. I don't want to mess with it. And even though they're facing a 6-3 team at their place, I'm going to give the slight edge to Goff. Now, I always say this too. Certain start-sit questions I will change my mind on. So if you ask me tomorrow, I might say, no, it's Rodgers over Goff. I changed my mind. And then I could flip back to Goff on Saturday. This is razor thin. I'm going to go into the Lions and Jared Goff here for the reasons I just stated. Plus, I just think it's a better offense. And when in doubt, I'll go with the better offense. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say one more thing that I totally neglected to mention. Jared Goff's home road splits are a real thing. And I know that they are going to Houston, but it's still a dome. And that man loves playing in a dome.
Yes.
So something to think about. And it may not be the first thing that comes to mind, but I do think that it plays a huge factor in how he plays. I mean, I know the Lions beat the Packers last week, but it was outside and, he didn't really throw for that many touchdowns. So
right. That's true. That's very true. Somebody that is always comes to the front of my mind when I think fantasy football, the incomparable Stacy Perez, who you can see Tuesday nights on the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel for the Waiver Wire Show. You can also check her out on the Player Profiler Sunday Tailgate, Sunday evenings, 7:30, heading in to the Sunday night game. At Stacy_Perez83 on the X. Stacy, once again, a 2-hour treat for me. I think the viewers loved it. I know the viewers loved it as well. Thank you so much for your insight. And please, if you face me again in Kentucky the rest of the season, and given how many leagues we play in together, I'm sure it's going to happen. How about letting me have one this time, given the way that you and Kate Otten just took it to me on Monday night this past week? Yeah, I know. I would expect nothing less. Yes. Thank you so much, Stacy. Be good. We will talk again very soon.
Yes. Thanks, Balky.
That is Stacy Perez. I want to thank her and Matt Deutsch, our producer. We will be back next Thursday at 7 p.m. RotoViz's own Hassan Rahim will join me for the full 2 hours as we head in to the Thursday night football game. Nelson Aguilar catching a touchdown from Lamar Jackson. It is now tied as they begin the second quarter in Baltimore, 7-7. We'll let you enjoy the rest of that. And while you're doing that tonight, myffpc.com, play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Formulate some Sunday lineups while you're watching the game tonight. For Matt Deutsch and for Stacy Perez, I have been Eric Balkman. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for watching.